Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I am with Geoff Morgan, owner and winemaker of Covenant Wines. Geoff, welcome to Wine Soundtrack, and tell us about Covenant.
Well, Allison, thank you for having me on your podcast. Covenant is actually a winery, so we call it Covenant Winery, even though officially our name is Covenant Wines because we make some 24 different wines. We also make wine in Israel. We only make 4 or 5 over there. But Covenant Winery is an urban winery in Berkeley, California. My wife Jodie and I are co-founders and co-owners with a partner whose name is Geoff Rochwarger, who lives in Israel. But we founded it and we started it 20 years ago. This is our 20th anniversary with the late, great Leslie Rudd, who was a famous Napa vintner and a very close friend, and without whom I never would have had this idea to start Covenant Winery.
So you said you make 24 wines, and plus the ones in Israel. Where are you sourcing your fruit from? Is it all over California or beyond? Do you own any vineyards?
No. When Leslie was alive, and he was alive for 16 of the 20 years that we've been in business, we sourced some of our fruit from Leslie's vineyards. So technically, we owned vineyards in Napa Valley at that time. But no, I don't own any vineyards of my own. I source grapes from about 20 different vineyards, starting down in near Santa Barbara and working my way up the coast into Napa Valley, Sonoma, Lake County, and Lodi.
Wow, all over the place. And what's your total case production?
We're at about 8,000 cases right now.
And where are your wines available? Are they across the country, across the world, or, direct to consumer, combination?
Yes. So, obviously we have a direct-to-consumer business, and we also are, I think we're in about 24, 25 states across the nation. We're also in Canada. We are in Tokyo, Taiwan, London, Paris, Israel, of course, Central America, Mexico, South America, Brazil.
You really are, all over the world.
Yeah, we have, we have very small production. With the 20 or 24 different wines that we make, typically production will range from 300 to 500 cases. We'll get up to 1,000 cases on a few of our more popular wines, like the Red Sea Red, which is a Rhone blend from Sonoma Valley, Sonoma County, actually, not Sonoma Valley. But we have a surprisingly wide range of availability considering how small we are.
So I'm curious, what is your first memory relevant to wine?
That's a good question, which is what we say when we're trying to think of the answer. I can tell you my wine epiphany. It's very,
Okay.
It's very solidly in my mind. So it wasn't the Lancers when I was 15, nor was it the Boone's Farm when I was 17, 18.
So in getting to your epiphany moment, I'm curious about this. Your first introduction to wine was kind of the Lancers and Boone's. Would you say that was when your first memory kind of wine, or as a child was it?
That was when I first started drinking really to get drunk. I was in high school. Lancers, I remember that 15-year-old Lancers. Well, it was amazing. But I won't tell you what else happened. But, in those days, this was in the 60s and early 70s, there was a lot of marijuana with those wines. So it was a very interesting time with rock and roll and other stuff like
Absolutely.
that.
But the aha moment.
The aha moment happened when I was 19. And I had moved to France to study. I was a musician, and I had been accepted at the French National Conservatory as a classical flutist in Nice. And I went, my first day in school, I didn't speak very good French at the time, and I didn't really know anything about where I was, but there was a student cafeteria. And I went in with my little tray. They gave me the tray. That's in French. The word for tray is a gamelle. I had a little gamelle, and you got to choose different dishes that you could have for lunch. This was lunch. It cost 2 francs, which was about 50 cents at the time. It was government subsidized lunch. And I saw all these little salads. Nice, they really eat well, okay? All these little, there was celery remoulade, there was carotte râpée, there was the betterave, I don't know what, there was all this stuff. I'd never seen anything like it. I took I remember very clearly, I took the celery remoulade, the celery root salad. And then it was a Friday. And back in those days, the year was 1973, okay? So back in those days, by decree, the student restaurants only served fish because it was fish on Friday for the non-Jews and the Jews alike. And but it wasn't like the fish sticks I grew up with. It was like the whole fish. It was like the head and the tail and everything is there with these little potatoes and a little bit of green parsley on the top. And wow. I didn't know how to eat it, but I took it. That was the only option.
Yeah.
The next station was your little wedge of camembert. The next station, they had a little dessert of some sort. And then at the next station, they said, "Monsieur, would you like white or red?" And I said, "Who's the monsieur?" "Oh, that must be me, monsieur." "White or red what?" And then I realized they were holding little splits of white and red wine.
Wow.
So what do I know? I took the white. And I sat down to my table with my 50-cent French meal. Actually, it was an extra franc for the wine, so I splurged. 75-cent meal. I sat down, and I took a taste of the celery remoulade. Somebody showed me how to eat the fish, how to take it off the bone. And then I took a sip of my white wine. Now, you know the story about Dom Perignon, when he finally figured out how to make champagne, and it worked, and he said, "I saw stars," and les étoiles. Well, I saw les étoiles at that moment, and I realized, A, I had been eating and drinking badly all my life growing up in New York, and B, I wasn't sure if I was going to learn how to be a good musician, but I was definitely going to learn how to eat and drink better.
And so...
Well, I stayed for 5 years.
And so you've learned, obviously, to eat and drink better. You lived by your word. So I'm curious, is there one wine? I mean, I'm sure there are many great wines you have drunk in your life.
Chave 1966 white in the cellar with the Chave family. About 10 years ago with Dave Ramey, we were there.
Yep. One of those memorable wines that leave an impression.
Yeah. And of course, white wines, when they're made right, they age beautifully.
So if we were to come to your home today, what would we find in your home? What's in your cellar, your refrigerator, the cupboards? Like, what do you and your wife drink?
Well, we drink a lot of really good wine. Not just our wine, of course. In fact, not a whole lot of our wine because we have to sell our wine. And plus, you get bored drinking your own wine. I really love, I drink a lot of white wine because I feel white wine is more versatile than red, at least than most reds. So we drink, Austrian, Grunners. We drink a little bit of German Riesling. I do like Burgundy. I don't have enough of it, but I drink red and white Burgundy. Actually, I drink more red Burgundy than white Burgundy. I don't drink much Bordeaux because the Bordeauxs that I really like are too expensive. Same with the Burgundies, but I don't know. I just got a really good Burgundy wholesale for like less than $30. Ooh. Red. It was fantastic. So, and then of course I drink. I like higher acid. I like more structure. I really don't like fat, flabby wines. Maybe because I lived in France for not only those first 5 years, but then I went back later and I was a musician in France. I got used to higher acidity, and I like that. I don't like harsh tannins, but I like structure in my wines. And so I love Cabernet Franc. I love Chinon. Okay, I really do. I do like. Some of the wines coming out of the Southern California, San Ynez Valley, or Santa Rita Hills, actually, making some terrific Pinots and Cabernet Franc and Syrah.
So you're an equal opportunist.
Yeah. I've never met a good wine I didn't like.
So is there a particular wine that you've drunk recently, something from your home or something that you opened up that drank really well?
Well, it's funny you should ask that. So I went to a restaurant called Acre in Oakland. I was there Saturday night with some friends, and I was looking at the list, and Jodie didn't want to drink much. My other friend didn't want to drink much. Her husband likes beer better. I'm thinking, what are we going to have? And I wanted the lamb, but I didn't really like the selections of reds. And then I saw Bruno Giacosa, 2021 Arneas for $67 on the list, or $64 on the list. I went for that, and it delivered. It delivered because it tasted great. It was elegant, beautiful, flavorful. It wasn't outrageously priced. And I think when I can find a really great tasting wine at a price I can afford, I love it.
So you said that you are more of a white wine drinker, or you love white wines.
White wine.
But if you had to choose one word, red, white, or rosé?
That's a loaded question, and you know it. Well, you probably know it.
I do know it.
So if you go out for dinner and everybody's eating, one person's having the lamb, the other's having the fish, the other's having the vegan course, and the other's having the whatever, you're going to buy, and you only have, the option of drinking one wine. Well, it's going to be a good rosé.
Or sparkling.
Bubbly, no. Bubbly, no? I love bubbly. We'll just do the bubbly, before we start eating.
Well, let me ask you on that note. How do you approach food and wine pairing? You're obviously very thoughtful when you're with friends having different meals. Do you think there are rules to follow? Do you follow rules? Do you have tips you can give people about what to look for?
Well, obviously, Allison, you have never read any of the 10 books I've written on the subject.
Oh, but this is giving you the opportunity to talk about your expertise.
Well, I don't know about the expertise, but I did write the book. I actually wrote 10 of them on food and wine pairing, and they're all cookbooks. And every recipe in every one of our cookbooks, except Working Parents, which is about how to eat well despite your children. But Dean and DeLuca, Food and Wine, Plump Jack cookbook, it's all about food and wine. Domaine Chandon, it's all about food and wine. The Covenant Kitchen, Food and Wine for the New Jewish Table. What else did we write? We wrote Cooper's Hawk for the Chicago Winery and Restaurant Group. That's all about food and wine.
Well, but they're
It's all about.
What is it about that you're looking for when you make the suggestions of pairings?
Well, so all the pairings in all of my books are generic. They're really about style. And it's really quite simple. I don't know why Americans are so hung up about what they're gonna have with a particular dish. First of all, the rules are simple, and this is what I write now. I've plagiarized myself in all 10 books because it's so simple and I can't reinvent it. Natural acidity in a wine balances the natural fats and oils in whatever is on your plate. Just about everything on your plate's got fats and oils. Now, there's tannin in red wines. Tannins tend to, as we all know, they glom onto protein, and so protein and tannin kind of soften each other, and so that's why red wine can go very well with steak. Then there's body, which would be the alcoholic content of your wine, essentially. Usually a full-bodied wine. There are more reds that are full-bodied, but not necessarily only. Will go better with a full-bodied dish, and a lighter-bodied wine will go better with a light-bodied dish. But I'm not quite done, Allison.
I'm here. I'm listening.
So here's the thing. There is complementary pairing, and there is contrasting pairings. Most pairings that work well are complementary. Similarly styled wines going with a similarly styled dish. So a rich wine going with a rich dish. But sometimes you really want that bright acidity, such as what you would find in Champagne, with your foie gras, or
to cut through.
To cut through it and refresh your palate. So there are no rules; there are only guidelines. And all of my books are still on Amazon, but most are out of print now. But if you really, I summarize each chapter on food and wine pairing is no more than 1 or 2 pages.
No, that's great. That's much more information than most people will give in food and wine. So I'm curious, you said you make 24 different wines. What are the different grapes you're working with? variety-wise?
So actually I make 19 or 20 here in California, and we make 4 or 5 over in Israel. But, well, I started with Cabernet Sauvignon 20 years ago in Napa Valley when Leslie Rudd and I tasted a really good wine from Israel that we thought was kosher, but it wasn't kosher. And we just thought, it's from Israel, it's got to be kosher. So we were just complete idiots. And we thought, gee, let's try to make a great kosher Napa Cabernet. So that was the beginning of Covenant. I started with 500 cases of really terrific, great wine made from, it was larkmead, actually. Larkmead fruit was the first vineyard I worked with, because Les wouldn't let me use his own grapes. He didn't trust me. Eventually he did. It only took 5 years. I mean, I don't drink a lot of Cabernet. I drink a lot more Syrah. I drink a lot of Cabernet Franc when I can find it. I drink more Pinot. So we make a Pinot Noir from Francis Mahoney's vineyard in Carneros. We've been doing that for about 11 years. I make Syrah from 3 different vineyards. One down in the Santa Rita Hills, also Bienacido, which is in Santa Marita. And then we have the Moavini vineyard is up on Sonoma Mountain, Bennett Valley. Those are my 3 Syrah sources at the moment. But I'm really proud of our Chardonnay from the Scopus vineyard. I just got 94 points in some magazine that will not be named for it.
Oh, well, I do have a question about that.
Yeah.
We're coming back.
And but I wrote to the guy who gave me the 94, and I said, dude, thank you for that, because I usually get 90, 91, and it's like, this is not a 90-91 wine. This is like an awesome vineyard and an awesome wine. And I like to say that, it's really Dave Ramey, interpreted by Jeff Morgan. So Dave Ramey, my dear friend, is one of the greatest winemakers in California, was, basically taught me how to make wine. And so if I'm making good wine, it's thanks to Dave. And Dave had me over for dinner a little while back, and he had this glass of wine on the table, white wine, and I said, what's that? He said, you have to guess. And I said, oh shit, I have to guess. I hate doing this. And so, but he said, no, you can't have dinner until you guess what this is. So I put my nose in the glass, and it smelled like aged white wine. I assumed it was kind of like an aged Chardonnay, really nice. Smells more tasty than it. I was thinking, gee, this tastes like Ramey Chardonnay. I'm with David Ramey. It tastes like aged. So I said, gee, it tastes like, maybe a 10-year-old Ramey Chardonnay. And he started laughing. And I said, what are you laughing about? He said, and he took the bag off. It was my own Chardonnay.
Wow.
It was a 2009 Covenant Chardonnay. And I thought, well, and we both agreed that I guess I learned my lesson.
Well, that's amazing. So just really quickly, are you working with any other white grapes?
Yeah, I'm very proud of my Roussanne from Lodi. It's awesome. My Viognier from the Galilee is awesome, and my Viognier from Lodi is awesome because a lot of people aren't doing this. All of my wines, by the way, are native yeast ferments. Most of them are barrel fermented, but in neutral oak. I make a really good Sauvignon Blanc from Lake County that doesn't see any oak. And I also make a super over-the-top, beautiful Sauvignon Blanc from Bennett Valley. Same vineyard I get my Syrah from Bennett Valley, and it's made more like Bordeaux, white Bordeaux. In fact, I want it so bad to be Haut-Brion Blanc that I have the Haut-Brion Blanc shaped bottle with the lower shoulders, and we call it in-house Faux-Brion.
Faux-Brion. So I'm curious, working with all these different grapes, do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
Yeah, whatever one you're drinking.
And then you made a comment to me before about getting a 94 and what a kind of like relief in a way after getting 90s and 91s. So I'm curious, what's your opinions on wine critics and scores? What do these numbers, do they mean something to you? Do they mean more to the consumer? Should they mean a lot?
Well, before I answer that question, we have to come clean to whoever might be actually listening to this.
Yeah.
And but a lot of people don't know that I was West Coast editor of Wine Spectator from 1992 to the end of 1999. So I was giving these scores for 8 years for Wine Spectator.
So how do you feel about your former self?
I made a lot of people rich. and a few people not so rich. I think more people have made a lot of money off some of the really great scores and reviews. It wasn't just the scores, but this is America. So Americans, they don't read very well. They want the number. Listen, I think, and they were blind. I didn't know what I was tasting back in those days. I don't know what's going on now. It's been 20 years since I left the Spectator. 22 years. Oh my God, 23 years since I left the Spectator. So I don't know exactly what the process is anymore. But in my time, I was blind. I knew what region I was tasting, but certainly I didn't know the producers. I think the Spectator and Bob Parker, who, by the way, did not taste blind, really did a service for Americans in that they gave what I would call the puerile, culture-free, culinarily challenged consumer in America something that they could relate to and that inspired them to explore wine in a way that they hadn't before. Okay, the 100-point scale, everybody got this. The 20-point scale wasn't working for us because in France they get 20 points. They have a 20-point scale on their school papers. At least when I went to school in France, it was out of 20. But here, it's 100 points, okay? And so I think in my day, the scores were, and it was a real still a fledgling American wine industry. Scores made stars, got people really excited. I know before I became a wine writer, I was just a consumer, and I would, religiously try to find the wines that had the best, reviews in the Wine Spectator. So it was a good thing. I think I don't think the scores are quite as effective anymore as they were back then. I think there are a lot of influencers and other people writing about wine. You don't need to have a publication. Back in my day, there was no internet, so you had to get published by an existing publication to get your opinions out there. Now everybody's writing about wine, and nonetheless, so like I just got a 96 for one of my wines in decanter, and it's probably one of the best wines I ever made. A Cabernet, my Napa Cabernet from 2019. I don't think it made a big difference, but it felt good, and it's something you can show off if you want. I mean, most sommeliers don't want to hear about your scores. I would never, go into a restaurant and try to sell them my wine by saying, I got 99 points. I got 99 points and whatever. It's just not going to happen. Right. It's an insult. I mean, and then I think retailers, they still like to have scores. That helps them move wine off the shelf. So if you got good scores, you can at least offer a retailer a shelf talker with a 93 or a 94 or a whatever, 91. Under 90 doesn't seem to register with anybody. And how accurate are the scores? It's about as accurate as it can get on any day. Right. Let me just say what I like better about not blind tasting is that you taste a lot of wines. If you're a professional taster, you'll taste 30 to 50 to 100 in a setting. And you get palate fatigue. But if you know what you're tasting and you're educated about the producers and the region that you're tasting in,
you have a context.
Yeah, you know what you're looking for as opposed to what you think you're looking for.
Right.
I've always said that if you think you know what you're looking for, that's what you're going to find. And that's not really fair to anybody, but it's the nature of the beast. So, yeah, I like writers who go to the trouble to understand producers, the region, the terroir, cultural practices, and then make up their own minds over a certain amount of time, as opposed to a snap judgment that then gets translated to your 89 points or your 99 points.
So for somebody who hasn't had the pleasure to drink your wines yet, to taste Covenant wines yet, what do you think they're missing out on?
That's another good question I don't have an answer for quickly. What are they missing out on? Well, as I said, all of our wines are native yeast fermented. Many of them are not filtered. None of them are refined. So I think they're a reasonably good expression of the place they come from. We don't pick underripe. We don't pick overripe. We try to pick in a place that will highlight whatever the vineyard has to offer. Our wines are typically quite elegant. They're not bruisers, but they taste. There's flavor there. You don't have to explain it to somebody. And because I make so many different wines, I kind of make a wine for every occasion, so to speak.
So, you're giving me a great segue to my next question. If space aliens were to knock on your door, which of your wines would you want to gift them?
That's a good question also. If space aliens were coming, well, it depends what they were having for dinner. That's what I'd ask them first. So if they were having, burgers, I'd give them my Lodi Zinfandel. It goes great with ketchup. Although really nothing does go well with ketchup, but that Zin can stand up to it. If they were having fish, I would give them Solomon Blanc. Unless it was fish with a very powerful sauce, then I might have them. Or if it was maybe it was a.
So basically, the aliens have to eat.
Yeah. You don't. It's a good point. I don't drink wine unless I'm eating. I mean, I almost never. The bubbly I might start a meal with no food, but I don't come home and have a glass of Chardonnay, and I discourage anybody from doing that because after work, because then you're going to be drunk before you even have dinner. I like to sip my wines or drink my wines with some kind of comestible.
I love that. So, you've been making wine for 20 years now.
No. I started in 1988. So that was 34 years ago.
34 years ago.
I was making wine in Long Island. A lot of people don't know that, but my first job was as a cellar rat and a vineyard grunt in a small vineyard and winery on the North Fork of Long Island called Christina Vineyards.
Well, so you have an even longer history. So I'm curious, and especially because you've worked in New York, you make wine in Israel as well as here, and every region is different in terms of climate. We know every vintage tells a different story, but in where you're making wine or where you're getting your grapes from, do you see huge variation from year to year? Do you see more commonalities? Do some regions give you more difference and others give you more similarity?
Well, when we talk about regions, I mean, in California, for example, there are so many microclimates that the vineyard I source my Syrah from in the Santa Rita Hills is only about 15 miles from the vineyard I source my Syrah from in Santa Maria. But it's like two different planets. I mean, one of them comes in super ripe and way early, and the other one is like, I'm struggling to get it ripe, and it's the last vineyard to come in during the season, and yet they're very close. So, again...
But vintage to vintage, do you see more similarities within each individual vineyard, or do you see variation?
I used to say yes, but now, I mean, we'll just look at the last 5 years. We've had, in addition to the smoke in 2020, we had the heat last year, like unbelievable heat, and then we had super amount of rain down in Santa Rita Hills at the end of harvest that we had to deal with. I mean, so really every vintage is a new nightmare, and our job is to try to deal with it.
So are there any signs or predictors that you look for that will tell you what a vintage will be?
What, after the vintage is over? If it tastes good, it's going to be a good vintage.
Hindsight's 2020.
Yeah. I mean, if you're having a lot of issues during the course of a vintage, well, it's going to be challenging. That doesn't mean it's going to be bad. In my 2020 Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa, I just happened to pick most of it before the glass fire. The day before the glass fire broke out. I had no idea. Nobody knew.
Right.
I lost one vineyard that I didn't pick, but 75% or 70% of my Cabernet came in pretty much smoke-free. So, you kind of know, well, okay, we had these issues. I lost a certain amount of my Sauvignon Blanc last year in the 216 degree heat. That didn't, because the grower I was working with, who he didn't listen to me, and he leaf plucked too many leaves away from the clusters because he was afraid of mildew. And I said, listen, dude, I don't think you're going to have this bad of an issue, because if we get a heat spike somewhere down the line, we're going to lose a lot of fruit. Sure enough,
Lost a lot of fruit.
Lost a lot of fruit. So it's it's not boring.
Mm-hmm. So have you established any sort of rituals that you do at the start of harvest for yourself personally, or you and your team?
Yeah, I stop the concert series that we start in April because I can't deal with it anymore after I start picking grapes. So we have our concert series starting April 23rd this year, and we stop August 6th, which is just about when the first grapes are starting to come in.
Perfect timing. So you're a musician, and we have a fun game we'll play at the end with music. But you're a musician, and I'm curious, do you ever play music to your wines in barrel, or do you talk to the wines? Do you encourage them, or is it just a musical connection?
Absolutely. Music is very, very important in winemaking. For example, anyone who plays really bad rock and roll to their wine in barrel is sure to have a disgusting, disastrous production. I mean, there's no way around it, okay? If you're playing the right kind of jazz, that would be jazz I like, you'll probably make excellent Cabernet. But for your lighter, fresher wines, you need to focus on maybe Brazilian bossa nova.
Ooh, you're well primed for the game we play at the end. Wow. Okay. So you've had quite an illustrious career. When you were a little boy, what did you want to be when you grew up?
A track star.
A track star?
Yeah.
And from there you became a musician.
Well, that's because I smoked so much dope when I was in high school that my lung collapsed, and then I couldn't keep running, although I kept playing the saxophone, but whatever. Where were we again?
What you wanted to be when you were a little boy. The fact that you got into...
When I was a little boy, I didn't know what I did want to be a track star. I wanted to be in the Olympics, and that dream was shattered with my collapsed lung. Then I was really into oceanography and biology, and I wanted to be an oceanographer. And then in my first week of college, when they told me I needed to take chemistry and biology at the same time, I realized this is not going to work. And it just so happened that the university I was going to had a great music department. And so I became a music major, and eventually I went to France because I didn't want to study anything but music. And then I stayed in France a long time, and
fell in love with wine.
Well, what happened was I had this gig in Monte Carlo with a great band in 1987, where I was the co-band leader with a French piano player who's a very famous jazz player now, Frank Amsalem, and we were in conservatory years earlier in France together, but. We grew up and we got this gig, and the other saxophone player in the band, Tim Reese, he's still with the Rolling Stones. I mean, it was a great band, okay, great musicians. And every night after the gig, I would be really excited about what I was going to start drinking. And I eventually realized I was more excited about what I was drinking than about what I was playing. And so maybe I wanted to be a winemaker, which everybody told me I was crazy to think, but I think you have to be a little crazy to become a winemaker. And so we moved back to the States because nobody would hire an American saxophone player in a French winery. And I got a job in Long Island as a cellar rat. I didn't know anything about wine except I liked to drink it. And I kept playing gigs in New York for another 4 or 5 years until finally the Wine Spectator hired me to be the West Coast editor, and I was able to quit the music business and move to California and work with them.
That's amazing. So when you look back at your career, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date?
I think building Covenant Winery is, I didn't think I could ever do that. It's a bit daunting. you never have enough money, even if your partner's a billionaire, because the billionaires don't give you the money. They just assure you that it's there, and then it's not. But they at least give you the misplaced confidence that you're going to go forward. And I'm very proud of the quality of the wines that we make there. And we turned a 9,000 square foot former garage into a really happening winery. We've got a 5,000 square foot crush pad right in downtown Berkeley. As a wine writer, I had the privilege. I've also written for the New York Times. I wrote for The Enthusiast. I wrote for Wall Street Journal for 10 years. Most people don't know that. I wrote all their wine advertorial, and which was quite lucrative, actually. And I actually had a column for a while with the Wall Street Journal in Japan.
Wow.
Despite the fact that I don't speak Japanese.
Wow.
So I think where I was going here is that I've been blessed to taste a lot of great wine. I've gone in the cellars of Petrus. I've been in the cellars of Cheval Blanc. I've been in Chave. I've been able to meet with the greatest winemakers in the world, David Ramey. And I know Michel Rolland. I made a wine with Michel for a couple of years. People don't know that, but so I've really been blessed to work with the greatest wine makers on planet Earth. And as a result, I've been able to taste a lot of the greatest wines on planet Earth. And I can tell you, my goal is to make wine that tastes as good as my favorite wines on planet Earth, and I think we're doing a pretty good job.
I like that. So when you, is there a piece of advice that somebody gave you along the way, something as a child or somewhere in work or in life, a parent, a teacher, that's something that is how you try to live your life or has driven you in your life? Guiding principle?
A number of people have said what I'm about to say to you, but I think the first person that said this to me was my wife in a dream map that she made for me back when the kids were babies. And the dream map said, believe in your dreams. And if you can do it, that's the way to go.
I love it. So speaking of your wife, if you were going to plan a romantic evening, what sort of wines would be open to set the mood? I'm sorry, I shouldn't answer that because I know it's depending on what you're going to eat.
Right. It's a good recovery, Allison. Look, if we're celebrating something, I love to celebrate with champagne. Mm-hmm. Oh, I forgot to tell you, the 1945 Christian, Christian Paul Roger wine that I had. Paul Roger, it was with Christian Paul Roger that I had the Paul Roger, 1945, disgorged in, I don't remember when I was, no, excuse me. We have to recut, got my vintages in my, so I forgot to mention with the Chave 66, the 1914 Paul Roger in Magnum I had with Christian Paul Roger and his wife, having lunch with them in their kitchen in Champagne, was pretty damn good. It was disgorged in 45 at the end of the war. We drank the whole Magnum, the three of us.
In 1914?
Yeah.
And you drank it in what year?
It must have been, let's see, I was with the Spectator, so it must have been like, I don't know, mid-90s.
Wow, that's pretty extraordinary.
It was good. And anyway, so back to your question, what would we have with Jodie? What would I have? So we start with a bubbly. I love bubbly. And some little snacks to go along with it. Maybe a little Parmesan cheese or whatever, or a pate. I love pate. And then, we eat in courses. So I don't just drink one wine with a really good meal. I have 3 or 4 courses.
I'm really looking forward to going to dinner with you. Wow.
Yeah. And so, I'll have a white wine of some kind to get started because I hate starting with red wine, even though we started with a bubbly. Probably then I'd go to a Pinot or a more moderate bodied red because unless I'm having like some grilled steaks, I really don't want to have Cabernet unless it's aged Cabernet, which then has mellowed and then that's better. And then I'd have, depending on, how much time we have to eat and drink, I have a second bottle of red wine that's a little more full-bodied than the first. And then there's dessert. Well, you got to have a dessert wine. And maybe then I'll finish with a brandy. Like, we make brandy. I bet you don't know that.
I did not know that.
The double-edged sword is the Covenant brandy of Chenin Blanc. And that's a good way to finish the meal. And if you can smoke with the brandy, then nothing like a Cuban cigar with the brandy. So that's, I guess, I'm getting hungry just talking about
Well, I would ask you what you do in your free time, but I think I know.
Practice my saxophone.
Practice your saxophone and eat and drink good food and wine.
Yeah, well, that's de rigueur, but yeah.
So complete the sentence for me. A table without wine is like?
Breakfast?
Although, didn't you just say you had champagne for breakfast with Paul Roger?
No, that was lunch.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Maybe brunch I'll have wine, but that's not breakfast. But breakfast, no. I need espresso, cappuccino.
So you've had the privilege to drink with, as you said, so many luminaries in the wine industry and are friends with a lot of these people. And I'm curious, sitting at a table in one of your wonderful meals, the Covenant wines are on the table and there's an empty seat. Who from any walk of life, living or deceased, would you want to share a bottle of Covenant wines with?
Living or deceased?
Stumped you on that one.
Yeah, I think I'd like to bring Leslie Rudd back.
For the 20th anniversary, and yeah. Well, I think that we are almost to the end here. You've been a wealth of information and great stories, and I could keep going on, but I have a little game that we play. And this is going to be right up your alley because it's called Wine Soundtrack. We pair wine with music. I
have a great story about this.
Okay.
So after I told you what you need to play in your cellar to make the right wine, I was bullshitting you.
I know.
Although I do play my saxophone sometimes in the cellar.
Because the acoustics are good.
Yeah, and sometimes I want to do a video or something, and it sounds good and it looks good with the barrels there. But actually, when I was at Wine Spectator, I remember being invited up to, I think it was a bubbly house in Sonoma Valley, and they had arranged a tasting for me, and which is not usually the way it worked at the Spectator. We must have written some big article about them, and so the wines were reviewed, but they wanted to put on this tasting. So I go up to the winery, and I walk into the tasting room, and it's all set up very elegantly, and they're playing. And I know right away what they're playing. They're playing Pablo Casals, playing Bach cello suites. And these are extraordinary. This is extraordinary music played by an extraordinary musician. I mean, he's dead now, but... And I said to the general manager and winemaker, I said, so, this is incredible music. So we have two options. We can taste wine, or we can listen to music. But we can't do them both.
Well... We're going to try to do them both in the sense that wine conjures up emotions, as does listening to music. So we're going to put a genre, an artist, a particular song to your wines. So you talked about your Chardonnay. What in describing your Chardonnay, what would it be similar to music-wise? What would you pair it with?
Since I just talked about Bach, Bach wrote 7 sonatas for flute, and those each one is gorgeous in a different way. And I would suggest any of them played by one of the many great flutists of our time. Most of them are French, although Galway is Irish, I think. But Rampal or Maxence Lorieux, any of these guys would do my Chardonnay justice.
And
there's a certain richness and elegance in the way the flute sounds played by the right musician. So that would pair well with our Chardonnay.
I like that. Okay, what about your Cabernet Franc?
Oh, well, the Cabernet Franc. I mean, that is definitely Jovan. Do you know Jovan?
I do not.
He's the Brazilian guitarist and songwriter, and the Cabernet Franc definitely has a Brazilian edge to it. It's like, I don't know, they're like, I just see crocodiles and piranhas and, big sea animals, and they have an edge. And Cabernet Franc, has that edge that right away it's Cabernet Franc. You smell it. It's not like Cabernet Sauvignon. It's Cabernet Franc, the edge. Jovan, his music has the edge. You should listen to Jovan, Dgavan.
I will for sure, with a glass of your Cabernet Franc. Yeah. And what about your Syrah?
Well, I make 3 Syrahs. So let's talk about the one that's getting the highest scores right now. That would be our Bien Nacido Syrah from just a small parcel that I'm allowed to take a small amount of fruit from. And that's just this big, rich, ripe, but also has that animal, the sauvage. And so that would also have been good with the animal, the sauvage, with the Cabernet Franc, but Jovan got that. So I would suggest, this would be, and then there's also, there's another Syrah, my Syrah from the Tsivon vineyard in the Galilee, which is a biodynamic vineyard that also...
You can give me 2 Syrahs and 2 songs.
Yeah, no, 2 Syrahs, you get 1 song. Okay. And yes, Shlomo Artzi. Do you know who Shlomo Artzi is?
An Israeli artist?
He's one of the most famous Israeli pop singers. He's old now. He's my age, so he's not as famous as some of the younger guys. But I love his music, and he puts it all out there, and he brings me to tears with great regularity. Although you can see I'm a crybaby anyway. But Shlomo Artzi, any of his ballads would go well with our Syrah.
I love it. You're very good at this, but what do you expect when someone's a musician and a winemaker? But we have been talking for ages, and we are coming to the end of this, and I do have a 2-part final question for you. You have traveled all over the world and drunk wine in wonderful places and probably been everywhere, but is there any wine region in the world that's at the top of your bucket list to go explore?
You mean that I haven't been to already?
Yeah, or maybe you just need to get back there and explore it.
I haven't spent any time in the Loire Valley. I'd like to. It's beautiful. I've passed through it, but I need to spend a little more time in Chinon, for example. Also. I've spent a little time there, but not enough. Saint-Brie is a little village where they make Sauvignon Blanc, actually. Oh, but that's actually Burgundy. So, Loire. I don't know Loire very well. They're making some really interesting wines in China right now. Mm-hmm. I'd be very curious to see what's going on over there. There's a lot of French investment in China. And let's see. Also, they're growing grapes. They're making bubbly in the UK.
Mm-hmm. Also Sweden now.
Yeah. So and I love raw fish. So let's go to Sweden.
Okay. Well,
and while we're at it, there's a whole budding wine industry in Japan. My associate and dear friend Ari Earl is consulting for a winery near Tokyo right now.
Wow.
I want to go there.
Crazy. Well, that's amazing. Now, if somebody wanted to taste your wines, do you have a tasting room? Can they come visit you? Where can they find you? Okay,
so you can find us in a lot of wine shops all over the world, and in regions where they sell wine. I mean, in America, the normal markets, New York, New Jersey, Chicago or Florida, California. But you can also go to our website, covenantwines.com. All of our wines are available on our website, and we ship direct to most states in America legally. And then you can find my wines on the list at the French Laundry. Mm-hmm. The next time you go there. We don't have as many wines in restaurants as I would like. I think did we mention that all of my wines happen to be kosher?
No, we didn't. We went the whole time without saying that.
Well, because I think I said in the beginning, we tasted a kosher wine that inspired us to make a good kosher wine. But yeah, all the wines I make, both in America and Israel, happen to be kosher, which doesn't mean anything in terms of the winemaking, because there is no kosher winemaking method. It just has to do with, it's a symbolic element as to who can touch the juice or the wine. The grapes anybody can touch. You have to be Sabbath observant to be in my cellar doing the hands-on work. But Sabbath observant, what does that mean? Well, you only drink kosher wine, you only eat kosher food, and you don't work on the Sabbath. So that's the only requirement. I think that a lot of people still have this image of Mogen David or Manischewitz or just weirdness. And so they think, God, it's kosher. I don't know if we want that. I've actually been in restaurants or showed my wine to certain sommeliers who said, yeah, this wine's delicious, but we don't need a kosher wine. And I've said to them, well, it doesn't even say kosher on the label. I mean, what is the problem here? And then they have, so I think we have a perception problem going on premise in restaurants, and we're working through it, but we're not out of the woods yet.
Well, funny how earlier I asked you, for someone who hasn't tried your wines, what are they missing out on? And I think that's a very valid point, which is these are kosher wines. Just as a side note, things that people should know. They will, for anyone who has a preconceived idea of kosher wines, this will change their mind. And for everyone else who doesn't know, it doesn't really matter.
I'll give you that. I mean, again, it's if you really care, it's really good wine. It happens to be kosher. If you don't care, it doesn't really matter.
Well, Geoff, we've been talking for ages, and I want to thank you for joining us on Wine Soundtrack. I know you don't have a tasting room because, like you said,
I do.
Oh, you do have a tasting room. Well, you know, you got.
No, we have a beautiful private tasting room that we do tastings by appointment, and it's gorgeous, and that's inside the winery. And then we also
and where is that?
The winery's in Berkeley, 1102 6th Street in Berkeley, and we also have a concert series on our wine patio, which is open on weekends from I think 12 to 5, and Saturdays and Sundays, and people can come in and taste our wines on the wine patio with snacks.
And the concert series, as we know, runs April to August. It ends in time for harvest.
Exactly. It ends this year August 6th, starts April 23rd. It's Sunday afternoons. And there are 15 concerts. About half of them are my band, which is called Free Run, which is in homage to the best wine out of the tank, the first run. And then we have some other fabulous bands that are also going to come through and play concerts.
I love that. So by osmosis, the wines in barrel are hearing the music.
Yeah, except the music's outside and the barrels are inside, but yes.
The vibration. Yeah,
the good vibrations.
Well, I think that if you are heading up, to the listeners, to the San Francisco Bay Area, and you head over the bridge to Berkeley, the East Bay, you can go to an urban winery and have an incredible experience, listen to music, drink wine, and have fun. So check out Covenant Wines. And Geoff, thank you so much for joining us on Wine Soundtrack.
And Allison, thank you so much for having me on your soundtrack. The Wine Soundtrack, yes.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.